The last child of humanity. Taran was only a child when the void of space swallowed everything he had ever known. His home, a colony ship bound for humanity's last refuge, had been torn apart in an instant, its hulls shattered like glass against the vast, uncaring silence. He didn't remember the explosion or the screaming, he only remembered waking up in the cold, weightless abyss, his tiny fingers gripping the remnants of a life pod that no longer functioned. For hours, maybe days, he drifted. The stars around him did not blink, did not move, did not whisper any words of comfort. His breath had grown shallow, his eyelids heavy. He'd accepted that he would die alone, nameless, forgotten in the endless black. But the universe had other plans. A shadow moved across the void, vast and luminous like a living constellation. It was not a ship, nor was it something human hands had built. It was something ancient, something woven from the very fabric of the cosmos itself. The dragon. Taran barely had the strength to lift his head as the creature unfurled its wings, their edges shimmering with the dust of dying stars. Its body, enormous beyond comprehension, coiled through the void as though swimming in an unseen current, its scales glistening with the glow of distant galaxies. More of them appeared, emerging from the void like celestial titans. Their eyes, brilliant pools of nebula and cosmic fire, studied him. Then one among them, a being with scales darker than the deepest corners of space, its eyes twin suns burning in the darkness, spoke. Not with words, not with sound, but with something deeper. A child, abandoned in the abyss. Taran shivered, his body weak, his mind struggling to grasp what he was seeing. He wanted to speak, to plead, to scream, but the cold had stolen his voice. The great dragon moved closer, its breath a tide of cosmic energy that wrapped around him, pulling him into its warmth, into its gravity. The stars blurred as the void was no longer empty. The last thing Taran saw before the darkness took him was the glow of starlight reflecting off endless wings. For the first time since the destruction of his world, he was not afraid. Awakening in the nebula's heart. Taran awoke to warmth. The cold silence of space had been replaced by a soft, pulsing glow that wrapped around him like a cocoon. He lay atop something solid but impossibly smooth, its surface humming beneath him, radiating a quiet energy that seeped into his very bones. Slowly, he opened his eyes. He was no longer in the void. Above him stretched a vast sky, not of atmosphere and clouds, but of nebula swirling in colors his young mind had no names for. Ribbons of blue and gold twisted around one another, blending with streaks of violet and crimson, forming a living, breathing canvas of cosmic wonder. Then the ground beneath him shifted. Taran sat up quickly, his breath hitching as he realized what he had been lying on. A dragon, its great body black as the void yet shimmering with streaks of astral light, was coiled beneath him. Its massive form stretched across a vast floating platform of crystal and stone. The creature's massive wings, lined with the glow of dying stars, folded gently against its back as it turned its head to face him. Its golden eyes studied him with something that could not be called curiosity. It was recognition. "You are awake," the dragon spoke, its voice both a whisper and a roar, filling the space between Taran's very thoughts. Taran's lips parted, but no words came. The dragon did not need him to speak. "You have drifted through the void alone, forgotten," it continued, its voice like the echoes of collapsing stars. "But you are not lost, child of humanity." Taran swallowed, his mind still catching up with the enormity of what was happening. "Where am I?" he managed, his voice barely more than a whisper. The dragon lifted its head, gesturing to the vast, shimmering expanse around them. "This is the nebula's heart," it said. "The sanctuary of the star dragons, the last refuge of those who have watched the birth and death of galaxies long before your kind took its first breath." Taran's gaze swept across the horizon. Now that he looked closer, he could see them, other dragons, their enormous forms drifting through the nebula, their wings stirring the cosmic dust as they moved. Some perched upon floating spires of crystal, their scales reflecting the glow of nearby stars. Others soared through the astral currents, their long tails leaving behind trails of shimmering light. The sight stole the breath from his lungs. The dragon before him observed his awe with quiet patience before speaking again. "I am Zephron the Starborn, keeper of the nebula's heart." His eyes darkened, flickering with a strange intensity. "And you, child, are an anomaly." The prophecy revealed. An anomaly? Taran blinked. Zephron inclined his massive head. "There are no humans left in the stars. Your kind has vanished, wiped from existence by war and silence. And yet, here you are." A shudder ran through Taran's small frame. He had known, deep down, that no rescue would ever come, that there was no home to return to. But hearing it spoken aloud, hearing it confirmed by a being as old as the cosmos itself, made the truth real. He faltered, his voice cracking. "I don't know why I'm here." Zephron studied him for a long moment before slowly unfurling his wings. The motion sent a wave of energy rippling through the air, the very fabric of space bending under his presence. "You were brought here by fate, or by the will of the stars themselves," the dragon said. "But there is something more, something written in the very fabric of this universe." Taran swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" Zephron's golden eyes burned like supernovas. "I do not yet know," he admitted. "But there is an ancient prophecy, one that speaks of a ruler, not born of the stars, but chosen by them." Taran's breath hitched. "A ruler who will rise when the star dragons stand on the edge of oblivion," Zephron continued, his voice resonating with the very cosmos. "A ruler who will unite what was once divided and reclaim what was lost." Taran shook his head, his heart pounding. "I'm just a child." Zephron let out a low, knowing hum. "So were the greatest of kings before their time." The dragon turned, spreading his wings, his body glowing with the light of the nebula. "Come, Taran. It is time for you to learn why the stars have not yet let you go." Taran hesitated only a moment before stepping forward. The void had abandoned him, but the dragons had not. As they soared through the celestial expanse, Taran followed Zephron past shifting clouds of cosmic dust. Below them, massive floating spires drifted through the void, each acting as a perch for other star dragons. Some watched him pass, their massive eyes filled with something he could not yet name, curiosity, doubt, something deeper. Zephron finally came to rest at the heart of a massive star cluster, settling atop a floating obsidian platform suspended between the stars. As Taran landed beside him, the sky itself seemed to pulse with awareness. A deep, resonant hum echoed through the nebula's heart as the gathered dragons turned their heads in unison toward him. Then they spoke, not with voices, not with words, but with something beyond language. "He is not of the stars. He is not one of us. Yet the void has delivered him." "Why?" "The trial of the void." Taran felt the weight of their scrutiny pressing against his chest, but he refused to look away. He had spent his whole life fighting to exist in a universe that had already discarded him. He would not be cast aside now. One of the star dragons, a beast of sapphire and silver, unfurled its vast wings. "This is folly. No creature of flesh has ever stood among us. He will break. He will fade as all mortals do." Taran clenched his fists. He wanted to argue, to tell them he wasn't as weak as they thought, that he had already survived the death of his world. But what good were words against beings who had seen the rise and fall of entire galaxies? Another dragon, scales dark as the abyss, leaned forward. "Yet he remains. The fire of the stars does not reject him. Perhaps he is meant to be here." A murmur rippled through the assembled dragons, their thoughts colliding like shifting tides. Zephron finally stirred, his golden eyes locking onto Taran. If he is to remain, he must prove that the stars do not err in their judgment. The murmur stilled. The dragons turned to their leader, waiting. "The trial of the void," Zephron declared. A stillness settled over the nebula's heart. Taran felt a chill run down his spine. What is that? Zephron exhaled, sending a ripple of golden energy into the air. A test. A passage. If you survive, you will no longer be an anomaly. You will be one of us. Taran's stomach tightened, but he lifted his chin. And if I don't survive? Then the stars were wrong about you. The platform beneath them began to shift and dissolve. Taran felt himself falling, not through space, but through something deeper. The nebula around him twisted and warped, colors bleeding into one another until everything became a swirling vortex of light and shadow. He found himself standing alone in an endless expanse of darkness, lit only by distant, dying stars. The cold was immediate and brutal, seeping into his bones. This was not the gentle void where he had drifted, this was something primordial, something that existed before the first star was born. Whispers began to echo around him, the voices of the lost, the forgotten, the consumed. They spoke of despair, of endings, of the futility of hope in an uncaring universe. Give up, they urged. You are nothing. You are alone. Let the darkness take you as it took us. Taran pressed his hands to his ears, but the voices came from within. His legs trembled. The cold gnawed at him, and for a moment, he wanted to surrender, to let the void claim him as it had claimed everything else. But then he remembered Zephron's words, "You were brought here by the will of the stars themselves." He thought of the dragons, ancient and wise, who had not turned him away. He thought of the warmth he had felt when he first awoke in their sanctuary. And slowly, carefully, he took a step forward. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, but he kept walking. With each step, something within him grew brighter, not his body, but something deeper. The darkness pressed against him, trying to snuff out that inner light, but it only made it burn fiercer. "I am not alone," he said aloud, his voice echoing through the void. "I am not nothing. I am chosen." The words rang with power he didn't understand. The darkness recoiled, and suddenly, the void was no longer empty. Stars began to appear, first one, then dozens, then thousands, until the entire expanse blazed with cosmic fire. And in that moment, Taran understood. He was not just surviving the trial. He was commanding it. The Emperor of Stars. When the trial ended, Taran found himself back on the obsidian platform, but everything had changed. The dragons that had once looked upon him with doubt now bowed their great heads in reverence. The air itself seemed to hum with recognition, as if the very cosmos acknowledged what he had become. Zephron approached slowly, his golden eyes wide with something that might have been wonder. "The prophecy spoke true," he said, his voice filled with awe. "You are not just chosen by the stars, you command them." Taran looked down at his hands. They appeared unchanged, but he could feel it, a connection to every star, every planet, every grain of cosmic dust in the universe. The power thrummed through him, vast and limitless, yet somehow contained within his small frame. "What happens now?" Taran asked, his voice somehow carrying across the entire nebula without him raising it. The dragon who had opposed him earlier, the beast of sapphire and silver, stepped forward. "You are our emperor now," it said, its mental voice tinged with respect. "The first and last of your kind to rule over ours." "But I don't know how to rule," Taran protested. Zephron's massive form settled beside him. "You will learn, as all rulers must. But know this, you are no longer the last human. You are the first of something new. Something greater." As if responding to his newfound status, the nebula around them began to shift and change. The floating platforms reconfigured themselves, forming a vast cosmic palace suspended among the stars. Dragons from across the galaxy began to arrive, their forms creating a constellation of living beings around their new emperor. Taran felt the weight of responsibility settle upon his shoulders, but it was not crushing. It was empowering. He had been saved from the void not to merely survive, but to lead. To unite. To reclaim what was lost. He thought of the colony ship, of the humans who had died believing their kind was finished. They were gone, but they were not forgotten. In him, their legacy lived on, transformed into something the universe had never seen before. The star dragons, Taran said, his voice now carrying the authority of cosmic royalty, will no longer drift alone through the void. Together, we will bring order to the chaos. We will be the guardians of the galaxy. The assembled dragons roared their approval, their voices creating a symphony that resonated across space itself. And in that moment, Taran, the lost child, the anomaly, the last human, became something more. He became the Emperor of Stars. Years passed, though time moved differently in the nebula's heart. Under Taran's rule, the star dragons emerged from their sanctuary to restore balance to a universe torn by war and abandonment. They became legends, creatures of hope rather than fear, bringing peace to worlds that had forgotten what it meant to be safe. And Taran, though he remained in the body of the child he had been when the void claimed him, grew wise beyond his years. He ruled with compassion learned from loss, with strength forged in the trial of the void, and with love given freely by beings who had chosen to save him when all else had failed. The last human had become the first of a new age. The end.